In Las Vegas, inside a packed arena vibrating with anticipation, a brash young fighter was about to ignite a confrontation far bigger than he imagined. What began as a celebrity exhibition turned deadly serious when arrogance collided with legend and the spotlight turned toward Chuck Norris. Mike Tyson wasn't your typical ringside spectator. For decades, he had been the most feared heavyweight on the planet. Iron Mike. A destroyer of men, revered for ending fights before they truly began. His presence alone could electrify a crowd. His career built on devastating knockouts that rewrote boxing history. When Tyson's arrogance boiled over and he swung at Chuck Norris, he had no idea he was stepping into a trap forged by decades of discipline. Norris's counter was swift, merciless, and precise, a single strike that shattered not just bone, but pride, igniting consequences the crowd would whisper about for years. What began as showmanship between legends became a brutal lesson in respect and mastery. The Las Vegas arena would never be the same after that single strike shattered arrogance, silenced the crowd, and etched itself into combat lore. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Las Vegas arena pulsed with raw energy. Every seat filled. Every voice blending into a deafening roar that echoed off the walls. Floodlights beamed down onto the polished ring at center stage, where tonight's exhibition match, a charity fundraiser featuring rising stars, was about to reach its climax. Cameras flashed like lightning as fans shouted from every corner, some waving banners, others leaning forward on the edge of their seats. Eyes locked on the fighters. The night's energy felt alive, almost electric, charged with the promise of something big. In the middle of this chaos sat Chuck Norris, calm and composed. Ringside, in the VIP section, dressed in a simple dark jacket and jeans, he did not move. No entourage. No attention-seeking. Yet eyes naturally shifted toward him. He sat effortlessly still, one hand resting loosely on his knee, the other by his side. No grin, no cheers, just focus. His eyes never left the ring. Beside him, Mike Tyson leaned forward, elbows on knees, watching with the intensity that had made him legendary. Iron Mike's presence added voltage to the already charged atmosphere, the perfect counterpoint to Chuck's stillness. Two icons of combat, representing different eras and philosophies, sharing the same front-row view. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed through the arena. For our main event of the evening, the man you've all been waiting for. The undefeated phenomenon with 15 straight knockouts. The man they call Iron Kid. Jack Blackwell. The crowd erupted as spotlights converged on the tunnel entrance. Electronic music pounded through the speakers as a young man emerged, bouncing on the balls of his feet. 27 years old, chiseled like marble, with a shaved head and tribal tattoos spiraling down his shoulders. Blackwell played to the crowd immediately, pumping his fists, throwing practice punches at the air. "Listen to this place," one commentator said through the broadcast system. "Blackwell knows how to work a room. Love him or hate him." His colleague replied, "The kid puts on a show." Blackwell climbed through the ropes with the fluid ease of youth, then circled the ring, pointing at fans, flexing for cameras. Some sections roared in approval. Others booed lustily. No one remained neutral. The fighter thrived on both reactions equally. As Blackwell strutted, cameras panned to the VIP section. The broadcast caught Tyson's face intense, leaning forward, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Then it found Chuck Norris, still as a mountain, expression revealing nothing. Across the ring, Blackwell's opponent entered with considerably less fanfare. Marcus Diaz, a seasoned veteran with 30 professional bouts to his name. Respected. Not flashy. Not arrogant. the kind who let his skills speak quietly. While Blackwell played to the crowd, Diaz simply stretched in his corner, eyes focused inward, preparing for the bell. Diaz is giving away about 10 years and a lot of hype, the commentator noted. But he's never been knocked out. Definitely the toughest test of Blackwell's career. The referee called both men to center ring. Blackwell towered over Diaz, using the extra 3 inches of height to stare down at his opponent. When the referee reminded them of the rules, Blackwell winked at the crowd. Diaz simply nodded, eyes never leaving his opponent. Blackwell's confidence borders on arrogance, the second commentator observed. But so far, he's backed it up every time. The bell rang, slicing through the crowd's roar. Without hesitation, Blackwell exploded forward. Fast, aggressive, relentless. His fists came like pistons, every jab crisp and calculated, not wild or reckless, but precise. Diaz moved to counter disciplined, stalwart, circling carefully, measuring distance. He had faced brash young fighters before, but tonight felt different. Blackwell didn't just want to win, he wanted to dominate completely. The crowd roared as he pressed in, dancing on his feet, weaving left and right, snapping out quick jabs that forced Diaz back, step by step. Midway through the first round, Blackwell began smiling between strikes. "You done already, old man?" he sneered under his breath. Diaz fired back with a sharp counter, almost catching him, but Blackwell ducked effortlessly, smirk widening. The crowd caught the exchange, the tension tightening. Some fans shouted encouragement, others laughed nervously. Diaz adjusted, trying to gain ground, block, dodge, wait for an opening, but Blackwell wouldn't give him the chance. He faked left, snapped a kick to the ribs, then rushed in close. Hooks to the body, jab to the nose. He leaned in close enough to murmur another taunt. "This ain't your era anymore." A final combination. A brutal right hook slicing across Diaz's jaw sent him stumbling. Another fast punch followed, and Diaz's legs buckled. The referee stepped in, but Blackwell was already turning away. Arms raised, crowd on its feet. Medics rushed in immediately. Diaz lay still, eyes blinking slowly, disoriented under the bright lights as officials called for space and checked his vitals. The arena's energy paused, some fans clapping wildly, others silent, almost uncomfortable with the brutality. But inside the ring, Blackwell didn't pause. He strutted across head, held high, flexing for the cameras. He leapt onto the corner post, pumping his fists, grinning wide as he looked out over the screaming fans. "Who's next?" he shouted, voice booming through the arena. Some cheered wildly, thrilled by his dominance. Others murmured, uneasy with the ruthlessness. At ringside, several heads turned toward the legends, watching quietly. The camera panned to Mike Tyson, who raised his eyebrows, mildly impressed by the efficiency, if not the showboating. Then to Chuck Norris, who hadn't moved a muscle since the knockout, no smile, no applause, just steady focus, eyes locked on Blackwell. The young fighter noticed, even in the middle of celebration, through the flashing lights and the noise, his eyes found Chuck Norris, the legend, sitting perfectly still in the front row. Something about that stillness, that refusal to be impressed, pierced through Blackwell's triumph. It was the one reaction in the arena that bothered him. It was the one reaction he couldn't tolerate. Blackwell's victory was complete, his dominance undeniable. As medics helped Diaz to his feet, the referee raised Blackwell's hand officially. The young fighter bounced on his toes, soaking in the adulation and the boos with equal pleasure, but something had changed. His attention had shifted to the front row, to the man who wasn't reacting at all. He broke away from the referee, jumped down from the ring, and grabbed the microphone from the announcer, still breathing heavily from the exertion of the fight. "You see that?" His voice rang clear amid the crowd's energy. "That's what real fighters look like in 2025. Cheers erupted, scattered at first, then building, but he wasn't finished. His eyes locked on the VIP section. "Mike Tyson!" he called out, pointing directly at the former champion. "Iron Mike, I learned from watching you, man. The aggression, the killer instinct. That was for you." The crowd roared as cameras swung to Tyson. The former champion gave a slight nod, acknowledging the tribute, if not fully endorsing it. His face remaining intense, unreadable. Blackwell's strategy was clear. Align himself with a legend to elevate his own status. He fed off Tyson's notorious ferocity while basking in his own moment. But then, his attention shifted. His eyes narrowed on the figure beside Tyson. "And Chuck Norris," he said, voice dropping slightly. The showman in him recognizing a new opportunity. The legend himself, Texas Ranger, man of 1,000 memes. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some fans laughed, others exchanged uneasy glances. "You know," Blackwell continued, playing to the crowd, "I watched your movies growing up. All that spinning kick stuff looks good on camera." He paused, letting his words hang. "But this," he gestured to the ring behind him where Diaz was still being attended to, "this is real fighting." The arena fell into a strange hush. Cameras zoomed in on Chuck, who remained motionless, face betraying nothing. Not anger, not amusement, not offense. Just calm attention. Mike Tyson shifted uncomfortably beside him, sensing the disrespect, his expression darkening. Blackwell misread the silence, taking it as an invitation to push further. He stepped closer to the VIP section, microphone still in hand. "No disrespect to your movies, man. They're classics. But all that roundhouse stuff? That's just Hollywood magic. Choreography." He pointed back at the ring. "This is where real power shows up. No second takes. No stunt doubles." In the press section, journalists began typing furiously. This was no longer just about Blackwell's victory, this was becoming the story. The brash young fighter calling out a legend. Chuck still hadn't moved. His silence was becoming its own kind of response, one that seemed to both puzzle and irritate Blackwell. "Tell you what," Blackwell said, his voice sharpening as he sensed the promotional gold he was mining. "Since you're front row, why don't you step in here? 1 round. Let's see if all that Walker, Texas Ranger stuff works in a real ring." Gasps rippled through the stadium. Some fans hooted, others stared, caught between shock and excitement. The officials exchanged nervous glances, clearly unprepared for this turn of events. Mike Tyson's face hardened, his jaw clenching visibly, but Chuck remained still. His breathing unchanged, his posture relaxed. Whatever thoughts ran behind his eyes remained private. Blackwell, emboldened by Chuck's lack of visible reaction, upped the ante. "Come on, Chuck. 1 round, let's see what you've really got. Or do you only fight with stuntmen and special effects?" The audience's reaction split dramatically. Some sections began to chant, "Chuck, Chuck, Chuck." Others chanted Blackwell's name, thrilled by his audacity. The arena transformed into a cauldron of conflicting loyalties, team legend versus team youth. Throughout it all, Chuck Norris remained silent, watching Blackwell with the same measured gaze that had made him iconic, a presence that required no validation, no defense, no response. The officials had begun moving toward Blackwell, clearly hoping to end this unexpected challenge before it escalated further. But the crowd's energy had taken on a life of its own. The chants grew louder, more insistent, Chuck! 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 Blackwell! 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 The young fighter stood in the center of it all, drinking in the chaos he'd created. His face glowed with the thrill of the moment. With the attention he commanded, yet beneath the bravado, a hint of genuine challenge burned in his eyes. Part of him truly wanted to test himself against the legend, to prove his way was superior. "What do you say, Chuck?" he called out one last time. "The old way against the new? Or would you rather just stick to the movies?" And then, for the first time since arriving at the arena, Chuck Norris moved. It was a simple motion, just the slightest shift in his posture as he leaned forward in his seat. The crowd's noise began to ebb, falling into an expectant hush. Chuck's eyes never left Blackwell's face. He still said nothing. But somehow, that small movement carried more weight than all of Blackwell's taunts combined. The entire arena sensed it. Something had changed. The arena buzzed with anticipation. A collective breath held. Chuck Norris remained seated, his eyes fixed on Blackwell, who stood in the center of the arena, microphone in hand, breathing heavily from both exertion and excitement. The silence stretched for what felt like minutes but was mere seconds. Then Chuck moved again. He didn't rush, didn't posture, simply stood up with deliberate ease. Each movement precise, controlled. He adjusted his jacket, then handed it to Tyson beside him. The former heavyweight champion took it with a slight nod, the faintest smile playing at the corner of his mouth. The crowd's reaction was immediate. A building roar that shook the foundations of the arena. Phones lifted everywhere, no one wanting to miss whatever might happen next. "He's actually doing it." The commentator's voice barely contained his shock. "Chuck Norris appears to be accepting Blackwell's challenge." In the VIP section, other celebrities shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances of disbelief and concern. A retired boxing champion leaned across 2 seats toward Tyson. "Mike, you gotta stop this," he whispered urgently. "Chuck's 70. Something. For God's sake." Tyson's eyes never left Chuck's back as the legend moved toward the ring. "Age is just a number," he replied, voice low but intense. "Some men just have it. Always have it. But this kid could seriously hurt." "Watch," Tyson interrupted, a knowing gleam in his eyes. "Just watch." Security personnel exchanged panicked glances, clearly unprepared for this development. The fight promoter, a heavyset man in an expensive but ill-fitting suit, rushed toward the ring, followed by officials with clipboards, liability concerns already visible on their faces. But they moved with hesitation, caught between protocol and the electric energy of the moment. Chuck walked forward unhurried, like a man entering a room he already owned. Every step seemed to suck the air out of the stadium. His face revealed nothing. No anger, no excitement, not even determination. Just calm purpose. The path to the ring parted before him naturally. Fans pressed against the barricades. Phones extended, desperate to capture this surreal moment. Some shouted encouragement. Others simply stared in awe. A father lifted his young son onto his shoulders, pointing, "Watch carefully, buddy. That's Chuck Norris. A real legend." Inside the ring, Blackwell's expression flickered between triumph and uncertainty. He'd achieved what he wanted: attention, controversy, headlines, but now faced the reality of what he'd demanded. The young fighter recovered quickly, bouncing on his toes, playing to the crowd. "Oh, he's actually coming down," he shouted, pointing at Chuck. "Look at that, folks. Chuck Norris is joining us in the real world." He threw his arms out dramatically. "About time." The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some laughed. Others watched in reverent silence as Chuck reached the steps leading to the ring. "This isn't just a stunt anymore. the commentator observed, voice hushed. This is real. This is happening. Blackwell better be careful what he wished for, his colleague added. Chuck Norris isn't just a movie star. 6-time world karate champion. 8th degree black belt in Tang Soo Do. Black belts in multiple other disciplines. That was decades ago. The first commentator countered skeptically. Some skills don't fade, came the reply. Some only deepen. Mike Tyson had risen too, following a few paces behind Chuck, his presence adding gravity to the moment. The expression on Iron Mike's face was complex, part concern, part curiosity, part anticipation. He knew, perhaps better than anyone in the arena, the difference between fighting for show and fighting for real. The promoter intercepted Chuck at the steps, speaking urgently into his ear, hands gesturing with obvious concern. Chuck listened politely, nodded once, then gently moved past him, continuing his approach. The message was clear. This wasn't about contracts or liability or sanctioning. This was about something older, more fundamental. Mr. Norris, please. The promoter tried once more, keeping pace. This isn't worth the risk. We can handle Blackwell's behavior. Issue a statement. Chuck paused, turned to face the man fully. It's not about handling anything, he said quietly, voice steady, despite the chaos surrounding them. It's about teaching. Some lessons can't be delivered in words. The promoter's protests died on his lips. Something in Chuck's eyes, not threat, not anger, but absolute certainty, made further argument seem futile. He stepped back, nodding reluctantly. Security at the ring, steps parted, without argument. The referee, a veteran of hundreds of professional bouts, looked toward the official's table, received no clear direction, and simply stepped back, hands raised in surrender to the moment. Chuck climbed through the ropes, no flash, no announcement, moving with the same effortless economy that had made him a legend decades before any of Blackwell's highlight reels existed. He wore a simple black t-shirt beneath his jacket, faded jeans, and boots. Not fighting attire, but it wouldn't matter. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The ring canvas creaked softly beneath his weight. Chuck moved to the center, his footsteps deliberate, almost silent compared to Blackwell's nervous energy and constant motion. The contrast was immediate and stark. Youth versus experience, chaos versus calm, showmanship versus substance. Are we seriously going to see this? The second commentator whispered, his voice carrying through the broadcast nonetheless. The medical team stationed at ringside exchanged concerned glances, one of them reaching for a phone presumably to have additional support on standby. The commission officials clustered in urgent discussion, occasionally glancing toward the ring with expressions ranging from disbelief to resignation. A cameraman pushed forward, angling for a better shot of Chuck's face. The legend's expression remained impassive, not stern or angry, simply focused, present in a way few men ever achieve. His eyes revealed nothing and everything. No fear, no doubt, no hesitation, but also no malice, no vendetta, no ego. Blackwell circled the ring, still playing to the crowd, still the showman. But his eyes kept returning to Chuck with a new wariness. Something about the older man's demeanor had begun to penetrate his bravado, a creeping awareness that perhaps he'd miscalculated. "What's the plan, Chuck?" Blackwell called out, voice mocking but edged with something tighter now. "Gonna throw some movie punches? Maybe a spinning kick for the cameras?" Chuck said nothing. He simply stood, waiting. "We're on prime time. Gotta give the people a show." Blackwell continued, voice rising to fill the increasingly uncomfortable silence. "Or are those spinning kicks just special effects? CGI magic? Still nothing from Chuck. Just patient observation, feet planted firmly, hands relaxed at his sides. The promoter had climbed into the ring now too, moving between them, hands raised. "Gentlemen, this isn't sanctioned, we can't allow this to—" "1 round," Blackwell interrupted. "That's all I'm asking. 1 round with the legend. What's the problem?" The crowd roared their approval. In the VIP section, Tyson leaned forward, elbows on knees, watching with the concentrated focus of a man who understood violence at its most fundamental level. Beside him, other fighters and celebrities shifted nervously, sensing they were witnessing something unpredictable and potentially dangerous. "Chuck," the promoter turned to Norris, speaking low. "You don't have to do this. He's just creating controversy. We'll handle the PR, make sure everyone knows." "It's all right," Chuck said, voice steady, loud enough only for those in the ring to hear. "Just 1 round." The promoter hesitated, looked between them, then at the crowd, and finally at the sea of recording phones. This moment was happening with or without official blessing. He stepped back, signaling to the referee, who moved forward uncertainly. "Sir," the referee said to Chuck, genuine concern in his eyes. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Chuck's face softened slightly. "I appreciate your concern," he said. "But yes, I'm sure." The referee nodded, then turned to address both men. 3-minute exhibition, he said, clearly improvising. "Standard rules, clean fight." Blackwell grinned, cracking his neck from side to side. 3 minutes is all I need, he said loudly, playing to the crowd. Chuck simply nodded. The referee looked at both men, sighed deeply, and then stepped back, waving his hand. "Fight." No bell rang. No official announcement declared the start. Just the referee's reluctant signal and the arena falling into breathless anticipation. For a moment, neither man moved. They stood centered in the ring, separated by 10 feet of canvas that suddenly seemed charged with significance beyond sport. Blackwell bounced lightly on the balls of his feet, hands raised in a conventional boxing guard. Chuck remained perfectly still, hands at his sides, shoulders relaxed. Eyes focused not on Blackwell's face or hands, but on his center mass. The contrast was striking. Blackwell, muscled and tattooed, embodied youth, vigor, and contemporary fighting. Chuck, his frame less imposing but radiating a quiet solidity, represented something older, something refined through decades of practice, rather than years of competition. The crowd's roar had died to a murmur, then to silence. 20,000 people collectively holding their breath. In the broadcast booth, the commentators had fallen silent as well, recognizing that analysis was unnecessary, perhaps even inappropriate for what was unfolding. Blackwell feinted left, testing Chuck's reactions. The older man didn't bite, didn't shift his weight, or change his expression. The young fighter feinted again, more aggressively. Again, no reaction. "Come on, old man," Blackwell muttered, just loud enough to be heard in the first few rows. "Show me something." Chuck's focus never wavered. He remained centered, balanced, waiting. Not with anxiety or hesitation, but with the patience of someone who had learned that rushing was usually unnecessary. The seconds stretched. Tension built. The crowd began to stir restlessly, some wondering if this would end up being anticlimactic after all. Then Blackwell, whether from frustration or strategy, decided to force the issue. He lunged forward with a probing jab, not his full power, but quick and technically sound. Chuck didn't parry or block. He simply wasn't there when the punch arrived, having shifted his weight so subtly that it appeared he barely moved at all. Blackwell blinked, momentarily confused. He jabbed again, faster. Again, Chuck wasn't where the punch landed. Not dramatically dodging or weaving, just executing the most minimal movement necessary to avoid contact. A murmur rippled through the crowd. In the VIP section, Mike Tyson's expression had transformed from concern to something approaching reverence. "What the hell?" Blackwell muttered, genuinely puzzled. He launched a quick combination jab cross-hook, thrown with textbook precision and significant speed. Chuck's response seemed almost lazy in comparison, yet none of the strikes found their target. He moved with an economy that made Blackwell's attacks seem wasteful. By comparison, no flourish, no excess, just pure function. The crowd began to respond. A rising appreciation that transcended the bloodlust of earlier. They were witnessing something unexpected, not an aging star being humbled, but a master demonstrating fundamentals many had forgotten or never known. "He's reading him perfectly," the commentator whispered, awe evident in his voice. "Anticipating every move before Blackwell even commits to it." In the ring, frustration clouded Blackwell's face. He stepped back, reassessing. The smirk had faded, replaced by genuine concentration. For the first time that night, perhaps the first time in many fights, he felt truly challenged. "Stop dancing and fight me," he called out, trying to recapture his earlier bravado. Chuck remained silent, his breathing unchanged, his focus absolute. He had yet to throw a single strike, had yet to do anything but avoid Blackwell's increasingly aggressive attacks. In the front row, a retired MMA champion leaned toward his colleague. "Looks easy, doesn't it?" he said quietly. "It's not. What Chuck's doing requires more skill than knocking someone out." Blackwell reset his stance, took a deep breath, and committed to a more serious approach. He advanced methodically, cutting off the ring, limiting Chuck's space to maneuver. It was a veteran move, showing that, beneath the showmanship, lay genuine fighting intelligence. Chuck acknowledged this shift, with the faintest nod, the first reaction he'd shown to anything Blackwell had done. The young fighter, encouraged, pressed his advantage, launching a tight combination aimed at Chuck's midsection. For the first time, Chuck moved more than minimally. He pivoted on his left foot, turning his body at precisely the right moment, letting Blackwell's punches slide past him. As the younger man's momentum carried him forward, Chuck's hand came up, not in a strike, but in a simple palm placed against Blackwell's shoulder. The contact was light, almost gentle, yet it completely disrupted Blackwell's balance. He stumbled to the side, nearly tripping over his own feet, before regaining his composure. The crowd gasped, then applauded spontaneously. Blackwell's face flushed with a combination of embarrassment and growing respect. He recentered himself, studied Chuck with new eyes. The mockery had evaporated from his expression, replaced by the focus of a professional facing an unexpected challenge. "Okay," he said, voice low and serious. "I see you." Chuck inclined his head slightly, acknowledgement without condescension. The dynamic had shifted. What began as spectacle had transformed into something more profound. A genuine exchange between fighters from different eras, different philosophies. From the commentary booth, "Ladies and gentlemen, what we're witnessing is the difference between fighting and martial arts. Blackwell is an excellent fighter, but Chuck Norris is showing us why he's a genuine master." In the VIP section, Mike Tyson sat perfectly still, eyes never leaving the ring. His expression had transformed from amused curiosity to something approaching reverence, the respect of one predator recognizing another of a different but equally lethal species. 1 minute had passed. 2 remained in their agreed-upon round. The atmosphere in the arena had changed completely. No more bloodlust, no more mockery, just 20,000 people witnessing something they hadn't expected and might never see again. Blackwell approached more carefully now, respect evident in his measured stance. Chuck remained centered, hands still relaxed at his sides, but his focus had intensified, slightly acknowledging that the real challenge was just beginning. "I didn't come here to hurt you, son," Chuck finally spoke, voice even and calm despite the chaos surrounding them. "I came to teach you." Something in those words, the steady confidence, the absence of fear or anger, triggered a visible reaction in Blackwell. A flash of uncertainty, quickly masked by redoubled determination. This wasn't about showboating anymore. This was about testing himself against a standard he hadn't fully understood until this moment. The clock ticked down. The real confrontation was just beginning. No bell rang. No official announcement declared the start. Just the referee's reluctant signal and the arena falling into breathless anticipation. Blackwell didn't hesitate. He charged forward in a blur of motion, fists flying with the speed and precision that had dismantled 15 previous opponents. Left hook, right jab, sharp kick to the knee, all delivered with textbook perfection and raw athleticism. His technique was flawless, each strike thrown with the confidence of youth and undefeated arrogance. But they didn't land. Chuck moved with almost imperceptible adjustments, small shifts in weight, minor tilts of his shoulders, subtle turns of his feet. Each movement was minimal, efficient, wasting no energy. Where Blackwell attacked with explosive force, Chuck responded with quiet economy. The contrast was stark and immediate. Blackwell's attacks were beautiful in their way. Power and speed, combined with technical proficiency that had earned him championship status. Yet against Chuck's measured defense, they seemed almost wasteful, full of unnecessary motion and expended energy. "What we're seeing," the commentator whispered into his microphone, "is the difference between excellent technique and mastery. Blackwell isn't doing anything wrong. Chuck is just doing everything right." In the front row, Mike Tyson leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes narrowed in focused attention. Unlike the roaring crowd around him, he watched in analytical silence, recognizing the masterclass unfolding before him. His expression was complex, part admiration, part nostalgia. Perhaps a hint of recognition that he was witnessing something he himself had never fully achieved. Perfect control. "Look at his eyes," Tyson muttered to no one in particular. "Chuck ain't even looking at the punches. He's reading intention before motion." The first 30 seconds unfolded like a strange dance. Blackwell pressed forward aggressively, unleashing combinations that would have felled most opponents. Chuck simply wasn't where the punches landed, not dramatically dodging or dancing away, just not being where the force arrived. Ringside photographers struggled to capture the exchanges, their high-speed shutters clicking rapidly, but often missing the subtle movements that made Chuck's defense so effective. Their frustration mirrored Blackwell's growing realization that something unusual was happening. The young fighter reset his stance, rolling his shoulders, shaking out his arms. Sweat already glistened on his forehead, not from exertion, but from the growing tension of finding himself in unfamiliar territory. His previous fights had all followed predictable patterns. Aggressive start, dominant middle, decisive finish. This was different. His attacks met neither resistance nor counterattack, just an absence where his target should have been. "Come on," Blackwell growled, launching another flurry. A lightning-fast jab, followed by a cross that would have separated most men from consciousness. Chuck sidestepped with such minimal movement that to casual observers, it might have appeared that Blackwell simply missed a conclusion, belied by the young fighter's immaculate record and proven accuracy. Confusion flickered across Blackwell's face, quickly masked by renewed determination. He pressed forward again, this time with a more measured approach, feinting with his left, then launching a devastating right hook. Chuck read the feint for what it was. He remained centered, letting the hook pass within millimeters of his jaw, close enough that several ringside spectators gasped, believing it had landed. But Chuck had calculated the distance perfectly, allowing the strike to expend its energy in empty air. Incredible defensive movement, the commentator breathed. Norris isn't even breaking a sweat. The observation was accurate. While Blackwell's breathing had already quickened, his chest rising and falling with increasing urgency, Chuck remained composed, his breath steady, his posture unchanged from when he'd entered the ring. No tension showed in his shoulders or neck, no strain in his face, just focused attention. Inside the ring, Blackwell's confidence began to crack. His attacks grew more forceful, his breathing more labored. Sweat glistened on his forehead as he pressed forward, determined to make contact with the legend. "Stand still and fight," he growled. Launching another combination, Chuck remained silent, his breathing unchanged, his movement fluid. Not retreating, not running, simply not allowing himself to be hit. His eyes never left Blackwell's center mass, reading the younger fighter's intentions before they fully formed. The young fighter's frustration began to manifest in his technique. His punches, earlier thrown with perfect form, now carried hints of desperation. His footwork, previously precise, showed moments of imbalance. He was fighting not just Chuck, but his own growing uncertainty. In the VIP section, a former champion leaned toward his companion. "Notice Chuck hasn't thrown a single punch yet." "He doesn't need to," came the reply. "He's winning without attacking." A minute passed. Blackwell had yet to land a clean strike. The crowd's energy began to shift, the initial bloodlust giving way to a dawning appreciation for what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a stunt or a sideshow. This was mastery made visible. Camera operators struggled to adjust their focus, trying to capture the nuances of Chuck's movement. Television directors frantically called for different angles, slow-motion replays, anything to help viewers understand the technical brilliance on display. Blackwell paused, creating distance between them. He circled warily, studying Chuck with new eyes. The smirk that had defined his pre-fight demeanor had vanished, replaced by intense concentration. He wiped sweat from his brow, recalibrated his approach. "You just gonna dance all day?" he called out, trying to recapture his earlier bravado. The words sounded hollow now, defensive rather than offensive. Chuck's expression remained unchanged. No anger, no satisfaction, not even acknowledgement of Blackwell's taunt. Just patient observation, waiting for the fight to continue on its own terms. Frustration clouded Blackwell's focus. He lunged forward with a powerful right hook, the same punch that had ended his bout with Diaz. Chuck pivoted slightly, letting the blow pass within millimeters of his face, then used Blackwell's momentum to guide him forward. Off balance. It was the first time Chuck had made contact, a simple redirection. Not even a strike yet. Blackwell stumbled forward 3 steps before regaining his footing. The young fighter spun around, eyes wide with surprise, then narrowed with renewed determination. "That's just defense," he spat. "Let's see you throw something." The tactic was transparent, trying to provoke Chuck into abandoning his controlled approach. But Chuck's expression never changed. His focus never wavered. He simply reset his position, hands loose at his sides, weight perfectly centered. In the commentary booth, the analysts struggled to describe what they were seeing. "This isn't just about age and experience," one observed. "This is about 2 completely different philosophies of fighting. Blackwell fights to dominate. Chuck moves to neutralize." His colleague nodded. "In all my years calling fights, I've never seen defense this efficient," no wasted movement, no unnecessary effort. The crowd had fallen into a strange hush, punctuated by occasional gasps when Blackwell's attacks came particularly close, or when Chuck's evasions seemed especially implausible. This wasn't the spectacle they had expected, but something rarer, something worth witnessing. Blackwell attacked again, this time with a blistering combination: jab, cross, hook, uppercut, followed by a roundhouse kick aimed at Chuck's ribs. The sequence was beautiful, technical, and executed with championship-caliber speed. Chuck slipped the punches with minimal movement. Then when the kick came, his hand moved. Not dramatically. Not with flourish. Just a simple outward block that caught Blackwell's leg at precisely the right point, stopping its momentum completely. For a moment, they froze in tableau. Blackwell with his leg extended in mid-kick, Chuck with one hand casually holding it motionless in the air between them. The crowd gasped. Then Chuck released the leg, stepping back to his neutral position. Blackwell stumbled, shock evident on his face. The kick should have either landed or missed, not been simply stopped. He retreated a step, circling more cautiously now, reassessing everything he thought he knew about the older man. "What just happened?" the commentator whispered, genuine awe in his voice. "He just caught the kick, like catching a baseball." His colleague shook his head. "That requires timing most fighters spend their whole careers trying to perfect." Blackwell's expression had transformed. The cocky smile was gone, replaced by intense concentration. For perhaps the first time in his professional career, he found himself genuinely challenged, facing something he didn't immediately know how to overcome. 2 minutes had passed. Blackwell's initial explosive energy had diminished, his breathing now coming in controlled but heavy measures. He hadn't landed a single clean strike, while the legend across from him appeared entirely unchanged from when he'd entered the ring. The young fighter adjusted his strategy. Instead of wild attacks, he advanced methodically, cutting off the ring, limiting Chuck's space to maneuver. It was a veteran move, showing that beneath the showmanship lay genuine fighting intelligence. Chuck acknowledged this shift with the faintest nod, the first reaction he'd shown to anything Blackwell had done. The young fighter, encouraged, pressed his advantage. He feinted left, then right, trying to establish a pattern that might create an opening. Chuck read each feint without reaction, waiting for the real attack. In the VIP section, Mike Tyson nodded appreciatively. "Smart kid," he murmured, finally trying to set something up instead of just charging in. Blackwell launched a measured jab, followed by a cross, not throwing everything into each punch, but using them to test Chuck's reactions. The legend slipped both with minimal movement, but Blackwell was watching closely now, studying, learning. "Come on," Blackwell shouted, frustration breaking through his composure. "Throw something. Or are you just going to defend all day?" He punctuated the taunt with a lunging jab that Chuck avoided with the barest tilt of his head. "I didn't come here to hurt you, son," Chuck finally spoke, voice even and calm despite the chaos surrounding them. Something in those words, the steady confidence, the absence of fear or anger, triggered a visible reaction in Blackwell. A flash of uncertainty, quickly masked by redoubled aggression. He launched into his most dangerous sequence, yet a blistering combination of punches, culminating in a flying knee strike that had separated 2 previous opponents from consciousness. The arena held its collective breath. This was Blackwell's signature move, his finishing sequence. Even those who had begun to appreciate Chuck's defensive mastery worried that this might be too much, too fast, too powerful for anyone to avoid. Chuck waited until the last possible moment, then moved not away, but toward Blackwell, inside the attack's effective range. As the younger fighter's momentum carried him forward, Chuck executed a simple palm strike to his sternum. The contact was minimal, barely more than a firm touch. Yet Blackwell stumbled backward, as if hit by something much more substantial. He regained his balance quickly, but the look on his face had transformed. Confusion replaced confidence. Respect began to erode arrogance. For the first time, he recognized what stood before him wasn't just an aging action star, but something he hadn't fully understood until this moment. "What the hell was that?" Blackwell muttered, more to himself than to Chuck. The crowd sensed the shift. The atmosphere changed from anticipation to reverence. They were witnessing something rare, not just technical skill, but the kind of mastery that transcends sport and enters the realm of art. In the commentary booth, "Ladies and gentlemen, what we're witnessing isn't about age or strength or even technique in the conventional sense. This is about understanding the fundamental principles that underlie all combat." Chuck Norris isn't just avoiding Blackwell's attacks, he's controlling the space between them, dictating when and how engagement happens. From the front row, Mike Tyson nodded slowly, a smile spreading across his face. He knew. He recognized the truth that Blackwell was just now discovering. Some legends are built on hype. Others are built on foundations, so solid that time barely erodes them. Blackwell reset his stance, breathing deeply, centering himself. The smirk was gone, the showmanship set aside. What remained was a fighter facing a genuine challenge, perhaps for the first time in his career. "Okay," he said quietly, almost to himself, "let's try this again." He advanced more carefully now, his guard tighter, his footwork more precise. This wasn't about entertaining the crowd anymore. This was about testing himself against a standard he'd never encountered before. Chuck remained centered, balanced, ready. His posture hadn't changed, his breathing remained steady. But a flicker of something new appeared in his eyes. Not quite approval, but recognition. Recognition that beneath Blackwell's arrogance lay a fighter capable of learning, of adapting. The young champion launched another attack, more measured this time, more controlled. A probing jab followed by a cross, not committed to either. Testing Chuck's reactions. The legend slipped both with characteristic efficiency. But Blackwell was watching closely. Processing. Analyzing. He feinted again, then changed levels, shooting for a takedown. It was an unexpected shift in strategy, showing versatility that his previous performances hadn't highlighted. Chuck sprawled perfectly, stopping the takedown attempt before it fully developed, then disengaged, returning to his neutral position. Blackwell rose, nodding slightly. "You've got answers for everything." "Huh?" Chuck didn't respond verbally, but something in his posture acknowledged the question, a subtle shift that seemed to say, "That's the point." 2.5 minutes had passed. 30 seconds remained in their impromptu round. Blackwell had yet to land a significant strike, had failed to impose his will in any meaningful way. Yet strangely, he seemed less frustrated than before, as if the challenge itself had become the point, rather than dominating or winning. In the VIP section, Mike Tyson leaned toward his neighbor. "Watch this. Last 30 seconds is when it happens." "When? What happens?" Tyson's smile was knowing. "When the lesson gets delivered." Blackwell circled once more, gathering himself. The crowd sensed something building, a final exchange approaching. The young fighter had abandoned his earlier bravado, his focus now completely on the task at hand. "All right, Chuck," he said, voice low but carrying in the hushed arena. "Let's see what you've really got." He launched forward with renewed purpose, not wild aggression, but focused intent. His combination was crisp, technical, and unpredictable. A jab that transitioned smoothly into an elbow, followed by a tight hook and an unexpected knee. For the first time, Chuck seemed to acknowledge the attack as worthy of response. He parried the jab, slipped the elbow, blocked the hook, and checked the knee, all with the same economy of motion that had characterized his previous defense, but with a new level of engagement. Blackwell pressed his momentary advantage, throwing a spinning back fist that forced Chuck to take a half-step backward, his first retreat of the encounter. The young fighter followed immediately, sensing an opening, launching a flying knee aimed at Chuck's midsection. The legend sidestepped at the last moment, letting Blackwell's momentum carry him past. As the young fighter landed, slightly off balance, Chuck's hand came to rest lightly on his shoulder. Not a strike, not even a push, just contact that somehow communicated volumes. Blackwell froze, suddenly aware of his vulnerability. In that moment, he understood that Chuck could have ended the exchange decisively, had he chosen to. Instead, the legend had offered something more valuable. A lesson. Their eyes met briefly. No words were exchanged. None were necessary. In that silent communication passed understanding that transcended the noise of the arena, the cameras, the spectacle they'd created. Chuck stepped back, returning to his neutral position. Blackwell straightened, nodding slowly, something new dawning in his expression. Respect. From the front row, Mike Tyson nodded slowly, a smile spreading across his face. He knew exactly what had just happened. He recognized the truth that Blackwell was just now discovering. Some legends are built on hype. Others are built on foundations so solid that time barely erodes them. As the unofficial round neared its end, the dynamic had shifted completely. What began as spectacle had evolved into something approaching revelation, not just for Blackwell, but for everyone witnessing it. This wasn't about age versus youth or movies versus reality. This was about the difference between fighting to prove something and moving with absolute certainty. The referee glanced at his watch, prepared to signal the end of their agreed-upon time. But everyone sensed that the real confrontation was just beginning, that the physical exchange had opened the door to something deeper, something that couldn't be contained in a 3-minute round or captured fully by the cameras surrounding them. Blackwell and Chuck circled each other one last time, their movement now almost harmonious. Opponents transformed into reluctant partners in a demonstration of principles most of the audience had never fully understood. The lesson had been delivered. Whether it would be received remained to be seen. The atmosphere in the arena had transformed. What began as spectacle had evolved into something approaching reverence. The chants had died away, replaced by a tense, anticipatory silence, punctuated only by the sound of Blackwell's increasingly labored breathing. 2.5 minutes had passed. 30 seconds remained in the round they'd agreed to. Blackwell stood at the center of the ring, sweat streaming down his face, eyes narrowed in frustrated concentration. Across from him, Chuck Norris remained composed, his breathing steady, stance relaxed, yet perfectly balanced. In the VIP section, Mike Tyson sat with uncharacteristic stillness, his focus absolute. The former heavyweight champion, known for his own explosive power, watched with the analytical eye of a master craftsman, appreciating work from a different tradition entirely. Beside him, other fighters and celebrities leaned forward, sensing they were witnessing something rare, not just a clash of bodies, but of philosophies. "Finish this?" Blackwell muttered, more to himself than to Chuck. The young fighter had discovered something unexpected in these brief minutes, a challenge unlike any he'd faced, a skill set that defied his understanding of combat. But pride wouldn't let him acknowledge it. Not yet. Around the ring, camera operators jockeyed for position, desperate to capture whatever might happen next. Sports photographers crouched low, high-speed shutters at the ready. The referee maintained his distance, having recognized that his role had become largely ceremonial. This exchange operated by rules older and deeper than any sanctioning body's regulations. Ringside physicians exchanged glances, their earlier concern for Chuck having shifted to professional curiosity. Neither man showed signs of significant damage, but the contest was clearly taking a toll on Blackwell, not physically as much as psychologically. The young champion's face revealed a man confronting something outside his experience, struggling to process it even as he continued to fight. He gathered himself for one final assault. The crowd sensed it, leaning forward collectively, phones raised high to capture whatever came next. At ringside, Mike Tyson's expression had shifted from curiosity to something approaching awe, the grudging respect of one predator recognizing another. "Watch this," Tyson murmured to the fighter beside him. "Real power doesn't need to announce itself." In the ring, Blackwell reset his stance. His earlier showmanship had evaporated, replaced by genuine focus. The transformation was striking, as if the encounter had stripped away layers of performance to reveal the serious fighter beneath. "All right," he said quietly, eyes locked on Chuck. "Let's see what you've really got." Chuck's expression remained unchanged, patient, attentive, neither aggressive nor passive. His hands hung loosely at his sides, his weight distributed perfectly between both feet. Not a stance from any particular fighting discipline, yet somehow incorporating elements of all of them. Blackwell exploded forward with everything he had left. A feint to the body, followed by a looping hook to the head, then a lightning-fast combination ending with the same devastating right cross that had made him famous. It was his signature sequence, the one that had earned him 15 straight knockouts, the one no opponent had ever successfully countered. The attack was flawless power, speed, and technique, combined in a way that would have overwhelmed most fighters. The crowd collectively held its breath, some turning away instinctively, anticipating an ugly collision. Time seemed to slow. Chuck watched the attack unfold with practiced eyes that had seen thousands like it across decades of training. Where Blackwell moved with the urgency of youth and ambition, Chuck responded with the patience of mastery. He didn't avoid this attack, didn't redirect it. Instead, he met it not with greater force, but with perfect timing. As Blackwell's cross sailed toward its target, Chuck's counter came, a simple straight punch delivered with surgical precision, not thrown with hatred or anger or even competitive fire. Just mechanical perfection honed through 50 years of disciplined practice. The two punches met in space. Chuck's shorter, more direct strike, arriving a microsecond sooner. It connected with Blackwell's jaw, just as the younger fighter's own attack was still extending. The sound was distinctive, not the meaty thud of typical knockouts, but the crisp snap of perfect impact. Blackwell's momentum stopped instantly, his eyes wide with shock more than pain. For a heartbeat, he remained frozen in place, suspended between motion and collapse. Then his legs buckled. Not dramatically, not violently. His body simply surrendered to physics and neurological reality. He sank to his knees, then sat back on his heels, blinking rapidly, consciousness maintained but equilibrium shattered. The arena fell into absolute silence. 20,000 people collectively holding their breath. In the commentary booth, the announcers struggled to process what they'd just witnessed. I'm not even sure what we just saw," the first commentator whispered, his voice carrying through the broadcast nonetheless. "That wasn't a haymaker. That wasn't a power punch. That was something else entirely." His colleague nodded slowly. "Precision beats power. Timing beats speed. We just witnessed that truth in its purest form." Chuck immediately stepped back, hands returning to a neutral position. No celebration, no posturing. The referee rushed forward, kneeling beside Blackwell, checking his condition. The medical team moved toward the ring, but hesitated at the steps. The young fighter wasn't unconscious, wasn't injured in any conventional sense. He was simply humbled. In the front row, Mike Tyson rose to his feet. Slow applause, beginning from his massive hands. The gesture spread first to the fighters and trainers who recognized the technical brilliance they'd witnessed, then outward through the arena, building into a crescendo of appreciation. This wasn't the bloodthirsty roar that often accompanies knockouts. This was something more refined: acknowledgement of mastery, of principles demonstrated with perfect clarity. Blackwell shook his head, trying to clear the fog that had descended. He looked up at Chuck with new eyes, the arrogance replaced by something approaching wonder. "How did you?" he started to ask, but the words trailed off. Chuck extended his hand toward the kneeling fighter. After a moment's hesitation, Blackwell took it, allowing himself to be helped to his feet. They stood face to face, the legend and the young champion, connected by that handshake in the center of the ring. "It's not about power," Chuck said quietly, so that only Blackwell could hear. "It's about discipline, patience, respect for yourself and your opponent." Blackwell nodded slowly, the lesson penetrating deeper than any physical blow could have. "I've been doing this all wrong," he admitted, voice barely audible above the growing applause. "Not all wrong," Chuck corrected him gently. "Just incomplete." The crowd, sensing the moment had transformed from competition to something more profound, continued their applause. Not the bloodthirsty roar from earlier, but something deeper: appreciation for what they'd witnessed. The applause built, swelling through the arena until it became thunderous. In the broadcast booth, the commentators struggled to capture the significance of what had transpired. "Ladies and gentlemen," the senior announcer said, his voice carrying unusual gravity, "I'm not sure we have the vocabulary to properly describe what we just witnessed. That wasn't just a fight. That was a demonstration of principles that transcend sport." His colleague nodded. "In 30 years of covering combat sports, I've never seen anything quite like it. The precision, the timing, it was almost mathematical in its perfection." On the arena floor, security personnel formed a protective cordon, keeping overeager fans from rushing the ring. Medical staff had entered, checking both men despite Chuck showing no signs of exertion, let alone injury. Blackwell stood steady now, the initial shock having passed. His expression had transformed completely, the cocky smirk replaced by something more thoughtful, more substantial. He studied Chuck openly, no longer as an adversary or a target for mockery, but as a source of knowledge. "I thought I knew what fighting was," he said, voice low enough that only those in the ring could hear. Chuck's face softened slightly. "Fighting is the least interesting part of martial arts." The comment hung in the air between them, simple yet profound. A doorway to understanding that Blackwell hadn't previously recognized existed. Mike Tyson had risen to his feet, clapping with genuine admiration. Around him, other fighters, trainers, and legends who had gathered for the event stood as well, paying tribute not just to the outcome, but to the lesson they'd all received. The promoter climbed through the ropes, his earlier panic replaced by an opportunistic gleam, already calculating how to capitalize on what had just transpired. He approached Chuck with an outstretched hand. "That was incredible," he gushed. "Absolutely incredible. We should talk about a rematch. A proper, sanctioned bout." Chuck's slight headshake stopped the man mid-sentence. The message was clear. This hadn't been about promotion or spectacle. It certainly wasn't about setting up future events. In the ring, Blackwell's cornermen had entered, hovering anxiously around their fighter. One handed him a water bottle. Another pressed an ice pack against his jaw, but Blackwell waved them off, his attention still fixed on Chuck. "I've been winning fights," he said, the realization dawning in real time, "but I haven't been mastering anything." Chuck nodded, recognition in his eyes, not condescension, but acknowledgement of a truth that many fighters never grasp, regardless of their success. The referee approached, uncertain how to officially conclude this unplanned exhibition. Chuck nodded to him, then released Blackwell's hand and turned toward the ropes. His part was done. No victory lap needed. No celebration required. As he moved to exit the ring, the crowd's applause redoubled. Chants of "Chuck! Chuck! Chuck!" echoed through the arena, not with the bloodlust of before, but with genuine respect. Along the ringside barrier, fans pressed forward, phones extended, desperate to capture a moment of connection with the legend. Security guards formed a protective corridor, creating space for Chuck's exit. The television cameras followed his every move, directors calling frantically for close-ups of his face, his hands, his posture searching for visual cues to help viewers understand the mastery they'd just witnessed. Chuck paused at the ropes, turned back toward the center of the ring where Blackwell still stood. The young fighter looked lost for a moment, then straightened his shoulders and raised Chuck's hand in the traditional victory gesture. It was the most honest thing he'd done all night. The crowd roared their approval, not celebrating dominance, but acknowledging truth. Not exulting in one man's victory over another, but in principles demonstrated with perfect clarity. In the VIP section, Mike Tyson's expression was complex, part admiration, part recognition, perhaps a touch of regret for his own youthful arrogance. He understood, perhaps better than most in attendance, exactly what had transpired. Not just a physical exchange, but a transmission of wisdom that transcended words. Chuck descended the steps with measured dignity. No hint of triumph or self-satisfaction in his bearing. Just the quiet assurance of a man who had done what was necessary. Nothing more. At ringside, journalists furiously typed notes into phones and laptops, struggling to capture the significance of what they'd witnessed. Headlines were already forming: Norris schools young champion in impromptu masterclass. Martial arts legend delivers lesson in humility. One punch. How Chuck Norris silenced arrogance. But none of these quite captured the essence of what had transpired. This hadn't been about humiliation or dominance. It had been about demonstration of principles, of truths that extended beyond sport into philosophy. In the ring, Blackwell remained standing, surrounded by his team but somehow separate from them. His eyes followed Chuck's progress toward the exit, his expression thoughtful, almost reverent. One of his cornermen leaned in, whispering urgently in his ear likely advice about damage control, about spinning this unexpected turn of events to preserve his marketability. But Blackwell shook his head, silencing the man with a gesture. "I needed that," he said simply. The medical staff approached again, insisting on checking his vitals, his pupils, his cognitive responses. Blackwell submitted to their examination with uncharacteristic patience, his mind clearly elsewhere. "Physically, you're fine," the lead physician concluded. That punch was unusual, precise rather than powerful. No signs of concussion. Blackwell nodded. "It wasn't about hurting me. It was about showing me something." The doctor raised an eyebrow, not fully understanding but recognizing the young fighter's sincerity. As Chuck reached the edge of the platform, he was met by Mike Tyson, who had made his way around the barrier. The former heavyweight champion extended his hand, genuine respect evident in his posture. "That's how it's done," Tyson said simply. Chuck accepted the handshake with a slight nod. No words were necessary between them. Both understood that what had transpired transcended ordinary combat. A reporter pushed forward, microphone extended. "Chuck, can you explain what happened in there? What was going through your mind when—" Chuck raised a hand, gently but firmly declining the interview. This hadn't been about publicity or attention. The lesson had been delivered. Words would only dilute its impact. He continued toward the exit tunnel, cameras following his progress, the arena still resonating with applause. Not the frenzied excitement that often accompanies combat sports, but something more reflective, more appreciative. Behind him, in the ring, Blackwell had finally moved from the spot where he'd stood frozen in thought. He approached the ropes, leaning out toward the commentator's table. "I need to say something," he told them, his voice carrying unexpected humility. "Can I get a mic?" The broadcast team quickly passed him a microphone, sensing an opportunity for compelling television. Blackwell straightened, waited for the crowd noise to diminish slightly, then spoke with a sincerity that surprised those who knew him only through his brash public persona. "I want to apologize to Chuck Norris," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "I disrespected a legend tonight. I thought being loud made me strong. I thought being undefeated made me untouchable." He looked toward the exit tunnel where Chuck had disappeared. "I was wrong. Thank you for the lesson, sir. I won't forget it." The admission hung in the air, powerful in its simplicity, in its honesty. The crowd responded with renewed applause, acknowledging the humility that was perhaps more impressive than any of Blackwell's previous victories. As Chuck disappeared into the tunnel, the arena lights seemed to follow him, leaving Blackwell momentarily in shadow, a visual metaphor for the young fighter's journey from spotlight to self-reflection. Some lessons arrive through study, others through suffering. The rarest and most valuable come through perfect demonstration principles, made visible through action rather than words. Tonight, 20,000 people had witnessed such a lesson. Millions more would see it through broadcasts, highlights, social media clips, but none would feel its impact quite like Jack Blackwell, who had sought to mock a legend and instead found a teacher. In that brief exchange, hardly more than a moment in the ring, something fundamental had shifted. Not just for Blackwell, but for everyone who witnessed it. A reminder that true mastery speaks not through arrogance, but through quiet competence. Not through domination, but through demonstration. As Chuck emerged from the tunnel into the back corridors of the arena, away from the cameras and the crowd, a slight smile finally touched his lips. Not satisfaction at having humbled someone, but recognition that sometimes the most important lessons are the ones we least expect to deliver. The young man would be better now. Not just as a fighter, as a person. And that, after all, was the point. Chuck descended the steps with the same measured calm that had characterized his entire appearance. No rush, no dramatic exit, just the quiet efficiency of a man who had done what was necessary, nothing more. At the bottom of the steps, Mike Tyson waited, Chuck's jacket draped over his arm. "Damn," Tyson said, handing the jacket back with a grin that mixed respect with amusement. "Still got it, huh?" Chuck accepted the jacket with a slight nod, the faintest smile finally touching the corner of his mouth. "Never lost it, Mike." Together they walked back toward the VIP section, security scrambling to clear a path through the crowd that had pressed forward. Phones extended, everyone trying to capture a moment with the legend. Chuck acknowledged them with polite nods, but didn't stop or pose. This hadn't been about publicity or attention. Behind them, in the ring, Blackwell remained at center canvas, the medical team checking his vitals, his cornermen hovering anxiously. Physically, he was fine. No real damage had been done. But something fundamental had shifted in his expression, in his posture, in the way he responded to those around him. The arena buzzed with excited conversation, everyone replaying what they'd witnessed, already embellishing details, the moment transforming into legend even as it occurred. In the press section, journalists typed frantically on laptops and phones, headlines already taking shape. Master Class. Chuck Norris, school's young champion. Respect earned. Legend silences trash talker. Age and treachery. Norris shows Blackwell the old ways. The promoter had climbed back into the ring, speaking urgently into Blackwell's ear, likely about damage control. About spinning this unexpected turn of events. But the young fighter seemed only half listening, his eyes following Chuck's progress back to the VIP section. In the commentary booth, the announcers struggled to contextualize what they'd seen. What just happened wasn't about fighting. Not really, the senior commentator was saying. What we witnessed was the difference between technique and mastery, between athletic ability and true martial arts. Blackwell is an incredible fighter, his colleague agreed. 15 knockouts don't happen by accident. But Chuck Norris showed us something beyond sport, something about discipline and respect that transcends competition. Chuck and Tyson had reached their seats. Several other celebrities and fighters in the VIP section rose, offering handshakes and backslaps that Chuck accepted graciously but without encouragement. He sat down, returning to the same composed stillness he'd maintained before the unexpected interlude. In the ring, Blackwell had finally shaken off his cornermen and the medical staff. He took the microphone from the ring announcer, who surrendered it without resistance. The arena quieted as the young fighter cleared his throat. He began, then stopped, collecting himself. The brash confidence had evaporated, replaced by something more genuine, more human. I want to apologize to Chuck Norris. The crowd murmured in surprise. I disrespected a legend tonight. Blackwell continued, his voice steadier now. I thought being loud made me strong. I thought being undefeated made me unbeatable. He looked toward the VIP section where Chuck sat, watching impassively. I was wrong. The admission hung in the air, powerful in its simplicity, in its honesty. The crowd responded with applause, acknowledging the humility that was perhaps more impressive than any of Blackwell's previous victories. Mr. Norris, Blackwell continued, addressing Chuck directly. Thank you for the lesson. I won't forget it. Chuck inclined his head slightly, acknowledgement without condescension. The moment stretched, gained weight, then passed as the promoter gently took the microphone from Blackwell, moving the event back toward its scheduled conclusion. The ring announcer took over, thanking sponsors, reminding everyone about upcoming bouts. The machinery of professional fighting resumed its operation. But something had changed in the atmosphere of the arena. The bloodlust had been replaced by something more reflective, more appreciative. Fans began to file out, still buzzing with excitement but carrying something beyond just the adrenaline of spectacle. Outside the arena, social media was already exploding with clips from the encounter. Hashtags like #Chuck Still Got It and #Respect the Elders were trending globally. Combat sports analysts were posting frame-by-frame breakdowns of Chuck's defensive movements, noting the economy of motion, the perfect timing, the flawless distancing that had characterized his performance. Veteran fighters from various disciplines shared their perspectives. What Chuck showed tonight wasn't about age or athleticism, it was about principles. To understand what happened, you need to look beyond punches and kicks to the fundamental concepts of balance, timing, and efficiency. Blackwell's not the first young fighter to mistake flash for substance. Probably won't be the last. But few get such a perfect lesson in the difference. In the tunnel, leading from the arena to the dressing rooms, Blackwell sat alone on an equipment trunk. Ice pack held to his jaw, staring at the floor. His entourage hovered nearby, uncertain how to approach this unfamiliar, humbled version of their champion. Footsteps approached. Blackwell looked up to see Chuck Norris standing before him. Mike Tyson, a few paces behind. "You're a gifted fighter," Chuck said without preamble. "But gifts without discipline limit their own potential." Blackwell nodded slowly. "I thought I knew what I was doing. Thought I'd seen it all." "Nobody sees it all," Chuck replied. "I'm still learning, even now." "After all you've accomplished?" Blackwell asked, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier mockery. "Especially after all I've accomplished." Chuck's eyes held Blackwell's, passing something important between them. "The moment you think you know everything is the moment you stop growing." Blackwell absorbed this, nodding slowly. "I'd like to learn. Really learn, I mean." Chuck considered the younger man for a moment, then reached into his pocket and produced a simple business card. He handed it to Blackwell without comment. Blackwell studied the card, then looked back up at Chuck, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Thank you." Chuck nodded once, then turned to leave. Tyson lingered a moment longer. "Listen to him, kid," the former heavyweight champion advised. "I was like you. Once thought power and speed were everything. There's more." He tapped his temple. "In here. And in here." He placed his hand over his heart. With that, the two legends departed, leaving Blackwell alone with his thoughts and a small white card containing the address of a dojo in Dallas. Outside the arena, fans clustered around the exit, hoping for autographs or selfies. Security maintained a clear path for VIPs to their waiting cars. As Chuck and Tyson emerged, the crowd erupted in cheers and shouts. Chuck acknowledged them with a wave, but continued toward the waiting car without stopping for photos or interviews. His quiet exit stood in stark contrast to his dramatic impact on the evening. As the car pulled away from the arena, Tyson settled back in the seat beside Chuck. "You know what just happened in there is going to be all over the internet by morning," he said. "Probably already trending." Chuck nodded, gazing out the window at the neon glow of Las Vegas sliding past. "That's not why I did it." "I know," Tyson replied. "That's what makes it matter." Inside the arena, the cleaning crew had begun their work, sweeping up discarded programs and empty cups. The ring stood empty, ropes still vibrating slightly from the night's events. But the energy lingered. Something had happened here that transcended sport, or entertainment, or spectacle. In the dressing room, Blackwell sat alone, his entourage finally dismissed, with firm instructions for privacy. He held the small white card in his hand, turning it over repeatedly, feeling the weight of what it represented, not just an address, but a path forward. A chance to transform, from merely successful to genuinely skilled. From famous to respected. He took out his phone, scrolled through notifications already flooding in, some supportive, many mocking, all intense. With a decisive gesture, he silenced the device and set it aside. The constant noise of social media, the performative personality he'd cultivated, it all seemed hollow now, exposed by 3 minutes in a ring with a true master. Blackwell carefully placed the card in his wallet. Tomorrow, he would make a call. Tomorrow would be different. A week later, the viral sensation had largely faded from headlines, replaced by newer controversies, fresher scandals. The sports world had moved on to other events, other athletes, other storylines. But in a modest dojo on the outskirts of Dallas, something important was happening. Blackwell stood on the training floor, dressed in a plain white gi, no longer surrounded by an entourage or cameras. His feet were bare, his posture respectful as he faced his new teacher, not Chuck himself, but one of Chuck's senior students, a man who had trained under the legend for more than 30 years. "Before we begin," the instructor said quietly, "tell me why you're here." Blackwell considered the question carefully. A month ago, he might have offered glib answers about improving his game, adding new techniques to his arsenal, boosting his marketability. "I want to understand," he said instead. "Not just how to hit harder or move faster. I want to understand the principles behind it all." The instructor nodded, satisfied. "Good. That's where it starts." As they began the first basic form movements, so simple they might seem childish to an untrained observer, Blackwell approached each motion with complete focus, setting aside the ego that had defined his career. Across town, in a small office lined with photographs spanning decades of martial arts history, Chuck Norris reviewed correspondence with his assistant. Among the letters and emails was a handwritten note from Blackwell's instructor, updating him on the young fighter's progress. "He's listening," the note concluded simply. Chuck smiled faintly, setting the paper aside. Sometimes the most important victories happen far from the spotlight, witnessed by no crowds, celebrated with no trophies. The quiet transformations that change not just how a person fights, but how they live. In a world increasingly dominated by noise, by spectacle, by performance, by endless self-promotion, Chuck Norris had reminded everyone of the power of quiet mastery. Not with words or speeches or social media posts, but with 3 minutes of perfect discipline in a Las Vegas ring. Some lessons fade with the news cycle. Others last a lifetime. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.